Welcome to our day 7 discussion. So, what we have discussed in our day 6 class. In our day 6 class, we discussed about the Kubernetes architecture. Okay, so we had a very detailed discussion regarding the master node and the worker node. And we discussed what are the various components we have in our master node, and then we discussed what are the various components we have in our worker node, and finally to interact to our master node, what we are going to use, we are going to use kubectl. Okay, so in this video we are going to discuss what are the various options do we have to run our Kubernetes cluster. So the first option which I'm going to recommend you is online platform. Okay, so in online we have the Killercoda site. We are good to run some initial configuration till our day 10. Okay, in our local machine also we are good to run using Minikube. And finally, the third option which I'm going to suggest you is using Azure. Okay, in Azure we are going to create a Kubernetes cluster called AKS, and throughout the session I am going to create a AKS session only for you guys. Okay, but I still recommend for initial days you're good to use the online and the Minikube one. So the first one which I'm going to show you is the online platform, using which you're good to run some, I would say, the initial days configuration. Then the same with a Minikube, it would be installed in our local machine. And finally, our AKS, which is a platform as a service provided by Azure. Okay, so let me open the Chrome, and the site which I'm going to mention here is called as Killercoda Playground. Okay, so what you have to do, you have to log in this site. Once you log in this site, then they will provide you the platform. If I'm going to run the kubectl get, I would say, notes, then see what we have. We have one control plane, and the second one we have the node one, and the session is going to be valid for 60 minutes, and you're good to extend according to your requirements. Okay, so this is one of the platform which you're good to, I would say, sign up, and once you sign up you're good to do some, I would say, lab. Okay, I'm not mentioning about you're not able to do anything regarding the services, the authentication, I would say the namespace, limit, range, resource quota. It does not make any sense to continue here, but my recommendation for initial days, you're good to use the second option which I have suggested to you guys is using Minikube. As I have mentioned, to connect to our API server we need to have kubectl. So the first thing which I'm going to do, I need to install the kubectl, and my downloading process has been started. Let me copy this one, and I have to set the environment variable. To set the environment variable, I'll go inside my C drive. Okay, I will create a folder name called as minikube hyphen demo. Okay, and will come inside and paste it, and let me create the environment variable. And to set up the environment variable, I'll click on path, will click on new, uh, I will click on path, then I will click on edit, and then new, and then I will browse, will go to C drive, and then we'll select the minikube hyphen demo, the folder which I have created. Let me click on OK. So I have set up the environment variable. Okay, and once my environment variable has been configured, the next thing which we have to do, open the CMD, and then in CMD what I have to mention, kubectl hyphen hyphen version. Okay, so right now we are getting an error. So what I have done, let me remove this hyphen hyphen and run it again. You see here my kubectl has been installed, and the version is version 1.28.3. So as I mentioned, the kubectl command line we are going to use to connect to our master node and eventually in master node our API server. So this part is done. The second thing which I mentioned, we are going to use what? Minikube. So the first, firstly what we have to do, we have to install Minikube. So let me go to the path where I'm good to download the Minikube inside my local virtual machine. So my Minikube download process has been started. So my Minikube has been downloaded. So let me go inside my C drive. Let me select the folder minikube-demo and let me paste it. Okay. So again, for my Minikube and for kubectl, what I need to do, I need to set the path. What I have done, I have already created an environment variable on this path. So automatically my virtual machine will detect it. Okay. So what is my next step? So my next step is to check is it Minikube installed in my machine or not. Let me mention Minikube version. Okay, so it is showing the Minikube has been installed in my machine and the version is version 1.35.0. So finally we have installed our kubectl command line and the second one is my Minikube. The third one which we need to install is Docker desktop. Okay, so let me download this one and then we will configure our Minikube. Okay, I'll mention Docker desktop for Windows 11 and Docker has been downloaded. Let me start the installation process. It will take around a minute or two to download the Docker. So after waiting for 4 to 5 minutes, the Docker desktop has been downloaded in my local machine. Okay, so what would be my next step? The next step it would be to configure my Minikube using Docker. What I'm going to do in my CMD, I will mention a command called as minikube start hyphen hyphen driver is equal to Docker and then I'll press enter. See, getting an error. So what I have done, I restarted my virtual machine and after restarting the virtual machine, let me try again. Okay, so let's see what I have done. I have started the Minikube start using a driver Docker. My Docker desktop is up and running. So let's see. So it is pulling a base image version 0.0.46. After waiting 4 to 5 minutes, my Minikube Kubernetes is up and let me run a command called kubectl get nodes and see we have one Minikube ready with a control plane and let me show you inside the Docker desktop also. See here we have the container which is running for my Minikube. Okay, so let me create one pod for you. There's one typo, kubectl run nginx and all. So whatever the command I'm writing, you're good to ignore it. We are going to have very detailed discussion regarding the run, nginx and all this configuration. But just now I wanted to show you how straightforward you can download the Minikube in your local machine and Docker and you're good to create the pods. Okay, I think it will take a time. Okay, so finally my pod is in a running state. So till the first option which I said to you, that is online using Killercoda. The second option which I said to you, that is Minikube and it is going to be installed in where? Inside my local machine. And the third option which we have, and I'm going to use throughout our series, is AKS. So let me create a AKS cluster for you. Let me log in inside my portal.azure.com. Okay, we'll click on Kubernetes services. We'll click on create. We'll select the Kubernetes cluster. So the first tab is basic. In basic tab, the first thing which we have to do is to select our resource group. I will mention here demo-AKS. Okay, then we have the cluster details, the cluster preset configuration. We have multiple options. In our upcoming videos, we are going to have a detailed discussion. The main agenda of this discussion is to create a Kubernetes cluster with minimum configuration. Why? Because we are at a very initial stage in terms of understanding the Azure Kubernetes services. Okay, so my request is whatever are the minimum requirements will create our cluster. As the session is going to proceed from day 7 to day 15, we are going to have a detailed discussion about each and every topic. Okay, I'll select dev and test. I'll mention my cluster name as demo-AKS. I will select the region as East US2. Fleet manager, I'm good to ignore it. Availability zones, not required. AKS pricing tier, I will select the free only. But in real time scenario, you need to select the standard or premium according to your requirements. Okay. Then Kubernetes version, I'm good to select the default one. Okay. We are going to have a very detailed discussion how to upgrade our Azure Kubernetes services and what are the best practices for it. Okay. So currently, I'm going to select disabled. Again, no schedule. Again, for this one also, none. And the last option which we have in our basic tab is authentication and the authorization. Right now, we are not going to select the Microsoft Intra ID authentication with Kubernetes RBAC or Microsoft Intra ID authentication with Azure RBAC. As I mentioned, currently we are in day 7 only. So we are going to have a detailed discussion regarding the authentication and authorization in Kubernetes. But now we need to create a cluster name called as demo-AKS with minimum configuration. Okay. So most of the values I'm going to select default only. Let me click on next. This tab is regarding the node pools. As you are already aware, in Kubernetes cluster, we have the master node and then we have the worker node. Okay, according to our requirements, we are good to have multiple worker nodes. But in the cloud computing environment, or I would say the PaaS solution, we are not going to have the access to our master node. What we are going to see? We are going to see our worker node. To be more precise, they are called as node pools. Okay, and the collection of nodes is called as node pools, and they works on the principle of virtual machine scale set. So once I'm going to create one node pool, then this node pool will have multiple nodes. Okay, and this is controlled, or I would say under the hood, it works on the principle of virtual machine scale set. So let me select this one, agent pool. Okay, and if you see here, the minimum node count is 2 and the maximum node count is 5. So we have the scale method, like how we want to auto scale. Is it auto scaling option you want to enable or using manual? This is only for demo purpose. So I'm good to mention one, but in real time scenario, what we are going to have, the auto scale method. Auto scale method means we are going to, if I'm going to mention one node, means in this node pool, I would say in agent pool, we are going to have one virtual machine running, okay, inside my virtual machine skill set always. And then if the workload are going to be increased, then it is going to be multiply by 5. And I would say just ignore it for now. Again, we are going to have a dedicated session to understand how the auto scaling works in the Kubernetes cluster and configuration. But for now, I'm providing you very 1000 feet kind of overview. Okay, let me select, I would say two. The most important thing which you need to understand is we have two kinds of node pools. One, it is called as system pools. The another one is called as the user pool. So whatever the application you are going to create, it would be created inside the user pool only. Although we are good to create inside the system pool also, but it is not recommended. Okay. So a Kubernetes cluster is mandatory to have a single system pool. That's why you see we are currently creating this a single node pool. That's why we are not able to select the user pool, and we are good to configure the name according to our naming convention. I have mentioned system pool here, and apart from that, the zones I'm good to disable. It does not make any sense for demo purpose to have deploy my node pools in multiple availability zones. And then I'm going to click on up. Okay, let me create one node pool. I would say it would be my a worker pool. Okay, and right now if you see we have the option to use the user pool or the system pool. Okay, so currently what we need to have the user pool. I'm good to select the operating system according to my requirement. I'll select the Ubuntu one. Let me disable the availability zones. Let me choose the size. I'll select this one, and then manual configuration with node count as 1 and click on add. Okay, so what I have done, I have two pools. One, it is called as system pool, where all my system pods are going to be created, and the second pool which I have created a worker pool, where I'm going to have a virtual machine, and I'm good to use this virtual machine to deploy my application. Okay, let me click on next. So currently what we have networking, this enable private cluster is not enabled. So enable private cluster is not required because it configure the private endpoint. The public access also, it does not make any sense. Let it be publicly enabled. So public access set authorize IP range. This one is not required. So the second option which we have is regarding the networking configuration. In networking configuration, we have the two options. One, it is called CNI overlay, and the second one is using CNI node subnet. Okay, so what we need to understand, like the smallest unit in Kubernetes is called as pods. Apart from pod, we have the other services like I would say replica set, service, replica set, deployment. So each and every object in Kubernetes is going to get one private IP. So from where the Kubernetes is going to allocate this private IP, it depends from the configuration. If you are going to mention the CNI overlay, so ad hoc level, what you have to mention? You have to mention one subnet range, and all the resources are going to get the IP from this subnet range. And the second option which we have, we need to create a dedicated subnet in our virtual network. Okay, and all the resources are going to get the IP from this dedicated subnet. So both the option has their own advantages and disadvantages. We are going to have a very detailed discussion once we are going to implement the networking configuration. For now, I'm going to select the default option as your CNI overlay. Then DNS name prefix, let it be. Then we have the network policy. Again, the same story. We are going to have a detailed discussion regarding the Calico and the Azure option. Then in the fourth tab, we have integration. The Azure container registry is not required, and I'm good to ignore the other options too. And the fifth option, we have the monitoring. I'm going to create a dedicated session between the AKS integration and the Datadog monitoring tool. Then we have the security. Good to select this one, enable workload identity, image cleaner, let it be. Azure Key Vault, we are going to have a dedicated session, the way we need to manage the secrets in Kubernetes and how Kubernetes is going to connect with our Key Vault to fetch or to retrieve the secrets from the Key Vault environment. So in our advanced tab, apart from what Kubernetes is going to do, Kubernetes is going to create a two resource group. The first resource group, the one which I have mentioned in the basic tabs, okay, all the basic infra, it would be mentioned there. The second resource group in which we are going to have the core infra. What is the meaning of the core infra? As I have mentioned, to run the Kubernetes cluster, we need to have some kind of specific resource running, like in our system pools. All those resources are going to be created inside my this infrastructure resource group. And then this manage Kubernetes namespace, we are good to ignore it. Okay, then click next and finally click on review plus create. I know while creation of this Kubernetes cluster, I have ignored so many topics, but trust me, throughout this uh, throughout this course, we are going to cover each and every topic in a very detailed manner. Okay, on a day one, it does not make any sense to explain each and every topics because right now our agenda is to create one demo hyphen AKS cluster with minimum configuration. Okay, so after waiting for 4 to 5 minutes, my AKS cluster has been created. Let me log in inside the AKS. So how to connect my cluster from my local machine? So initially what we have done, we have already installed kubectl. Okay, the kubectl has been already installed in my local machine, and this AKS cluster is present inside my Azure cloud. In more technical terms, inside my subscription. So the first thing which I have to do, I have to authenticate myself with the subscription, and once it is done, then I will show you the steps which are required to connect to my Kubernetes cluster. So subscription, I will mention a command az login. It will ask to mention my username. I mentioned this one. It is mentioning retrieving tenants and subscription for the selection. So finally what it is showing, currently I have the two subscription. Let me select the first one. So finally from my local machine, I have connected the Azure subscription which I have. Then to connect my Kubernetes cluster, I need to click on connect, and then the first option is set the cluster subscription. Let me select it. Although I have already done it, but let me do it again. I have set the subscription. Let me clear my screen, and then I have to download the cluster credential. Okay, basically what it is going to do, it is going to create a kubeconfig file. So just for information, I'm saying why, because we are going to have a very detailed discussion in our authentication and the authorization video. Okay, so just ignore for now. Let me press enter. Okay, so we'll run a command called kubectl get nodes. So I have one nodes. Then let me create one pod for you. Again the same pod I'm going to create. Pod has been created. Kubectl get pods, and see, this is the pod which I have created around 5 seconds ago. How to create a pod, what are the various options we have, we are going to discuss in our next video.